Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our 5th annual 88 Cities Summit. Please welcome to the stage President and CEO of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Stephen Cheung.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of my colleagues at the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, LAEDC, it is my pleasure to welcome you this morning to LAEDC's 5th 88 Cities Summit. It's been 5 years since we started this, and it's been growing, and the content's been getting more and more exciting. We established this annual event to convene all of you, the leaders of our local governments who represent the communities on whose foundation we have collectively built one of the largest regional economies in the world, an $800 billion economic powerhouse that supports nearly 5 million jobs for all of us and our neighbors throughout Los Angeles County. Many of you have helped us develop and implement key aspects and key elements of the Los Angeles County strategic plans for economic development over the past decade. And you all play a critical role in ensuring that this regional economy continues to grow and become more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient in the future. LADC's new 5-pillar approach on economic development, which includes workforce development, economic research, business assistance, foreign direct investment, and industry cluster development serve as the foundation for today's program. Our LADC team has assembled 3 panels of distinguished speakers for you today, all revolving around this year's theme, human-centered cities. We must continue to adapt to the changing nature of the world around us, and we must also become better at anticipating basic human needs, responding to our community's voices, and acknowledging that the robust and equitable economic development must be human-centered. You all have QR codes in front of you this morning on your little plaque in front of you, and please scan it for our full program, including our agenda, speaker bios, and additional information on our program. Our 3 panel topics today will be critical to each and every one of your cities. Give me a second, I just lost my line here. Sometimes it's better for me to just use paper instead of my iPad, too advanced for myself. So the 3-panel discussion today will be the economic benefits of ending homelessness, ending the digital divide, and the case for clean tech infrastructure. We urge each of you to be a part of the conversation, ask questions, engage with our panelists, and help create workable solutions to take back to your cities and help inform strategic and effective approaches for us all. Our goal today is to have you leave with newly identified partners on ideas on how to better serve the residents of your communities, and we include that in terms of residents, both the people and the employers for those people, who contribute so much to the vibrancy of life in each of your cities. As with all LADC events, we're grateful for generous sponsors committed to supporting our ability to bring such valuable programming to you. This year's sponsors include Southern California Edison, Southern California Gas Company, Verizon, Microsoft, UCLA Extension, Deloitte, HRNA, NPower, Los Angeles County Supervisor District 1, Supervisor Hilda Solis, Los Angeles County Supervisor District 5, Supervisor Catherine Barger. Now, you notice some of the themes for this year are very similar to what we did last year. That is because you've asked and we've listened. The LADC believes that we cannot have a truly inclusive and human-centered economy without connecting every household and small business to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. The future is digital, and none of our nearly 10 million neighbors in this county should be left unconnected to that future. As you will hear in our session on ending the digital divide, there are a significant number of important roles that each and every one of your cities and your councils of governments can play to ensure that every resident and small business in your jurisdiction is connected. We have heard it so many times now. Housing is a human right. Our session on the economic benefits of ending homelessness is as essential as it gets to our future. It has become far too difficult for far too many to afford to live here in Los Angeles County. And almost 40% of Angelenos are living paycheck to paycheck. It's not a problem unique to our county, but it's a problem we must all rededicate ourselves to addressing. Finally, our collective future depends on all of us committing and investing in a cleaner future. and that requires clean tech infrastructure as a crucial component of that future. Getting this right can also make our communities more attractive and a healthier place to live and set an example for others to see that economic growth and environmental sustainability are mutual goals. Also, backed by popular demand, you'll be hearing from several of your peers in giving inspiring, informative, and thought-provoking presentations, sharing innovative ideas or programs that they have found success in their own city, and what each of them has learned through the development of that process. And today's City Talk is essential as we learn and share with each other. We're excited and grateful for all the speakers who've joined us today. And fortunately, there's a slight change. We were hoping that Mayor Bass will be able to join us in person, but unfortunately, her schedule changed, so she'll be sending her message by video. But we're grateful for all of you being here with us today. So let's keep the program rolling, and welcome to the stage the board chair for the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Mr. Steve Olson.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning, everyone. And a warm welcome to each and every one of you. The LAEDC wouldn't exist and indeed would have no purpose but for the 88 cities that make up this great county. So it's really wonderful to have all of you here today. And I'm honored to stand before you as our board chair. I hadn't been to this event before. I've always had a conflict for it. So I really wanted to come this year and see what it was all about, and it's just out in the hallway already. It's been well worth the trip meeting several of you. The 88 Cities Summit marks a significant moment for our organization as we gather to collectively listen, share, and come up with solutions to make Los Angeles County a better place to live, a better place to work, and a better place to play. The work that LAEDC has done throughout the SURF process, Business Assistance Program, Workforce Development, and the Institute for Applied Economics exemplifies the spirit of collaboration, innovation, and the power of collective action. As we come together, united by a shared vision, at least we hope so, we embark on a journey that promises a lasting impact of the lives of all of those whom we serve in this great county. I would like to express my gratitude to the over 24 unique, and they are truly unique, cities that have joined us here today. And I think, collectively we have a lot of experience, knowledge, and frankly, power. So I'm really excited to see what we can accomplish today and where it takes us in the future. Economic justice and economic development have become buzzwords, I think, lately. I've heard them more in the last 5 or 10 years than ever before. But these are not buzzwords for the LAEDC. Indeed, we've been executing on that mission for 40 years. The LAEDC has been reinventing our economy to collaboratively advance growth and prosperity since we began. And it's not a solitary pursuit. It's really a collective endeavor. It's a collective endeavor that thrives on the synergy of the diverse perspectives, expertise, and talents in this room and in our 88 cities. So thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the LAEDC team, and thank you to our sponsors, and most importantly, thank you to all of the leaders here in this room today. Now, please direct your attention to the video monitors for 2 important messages.
Hi, I'm Holly Mitchell, LA County Supervisor from the 2nd District, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation's annual 88 City Summit. I'm really excited that today's agenda focuses on 3 issues that are critical for our region: closing the digital divide, addressing the homelessness crisis, and building clean tech infrastructure for the future. These issues are all major priorities for me, and I have worked to ensure the county is leading on solving them. from directing the county to invest $65 million in digital equity programs to ensure those who can't access affordable and reliable internet are fully connected. 2, ensuring that the county applies an equity framework to allocating the funding from the American Rescue Plan Act so that the communities that need it the most are not excluded from these investments. I understand how critical today's conversation is and the importance of partnerships to get this work done. LA County's challenges require regional collaboration, and every city, all 88 of you, play an important role in building a strong regional economy. It's critical that our economic investments are human-centered and equity-focused, intentionally designed for our highest need residents. There's so many opportunities for cities to play a leading role in these issues. And as you know, through land use powers, local cities can ensure they implement policies that are friendly to small businesses and high-quality employers. You can also tackle the homelessness crisis by building more housing across all levels in your jurisdictions and welcoming new neighbors. And I want to uplift that you, cities, can also work with the county to ensure that our workers have equitable access to economic opportunity. There are several programs that the county is leading to advance this work. For example, I'm proud of the county's wage enforcement program housed within the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. Through this program, the county has contracted with other cities to ensure workers know their rights and to prevent and mitigate wage theft. A fair wage for all residents is critical to building a healthy, inclusive economy. The county's Department of Economic Opportunity is also leading on a Fair Chance campaign program, engaging businesses to learn about fair chance laws and committing to lead by example by hiring skilled and dedicated residents that were formerly incarcerated. I encourage cities to engage with the many opportunities to partner and work with LA County. I'm really proud of the work all of you, all of our 88 cities across LA County have done to creatively build a healthy regional economy. And I know we can continue to make progress by cooperating with partners across the region and ensuring our economic development strategies are inclusive and meet the true needs of diverse communities, all the communities that we should serve together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and the LAEDC for inviting me to speak today at such a tremendous event. The city is so grateful for your partnership and outstanding leadership as president and CEO of the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation. And to everyone who is joining today, welcome to LAEDC's 88 City Summit. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person, but I am excited to say hello to city council members, city managers, city departments, regional partners, and my fellow city mayors throughout Los Angeles County. I look forward to continuing to build a relationship with each of you so that together we can develop regional approaches to the challenges we all face. It's so fitting that this year's 88 Cities theme is human-centered cities, as we are facing an unprecedented homeless crisis, which calls for cities to do just that. Focus on policies that are human-centered, aiming to support individuals that face barriers to living decent and healthy lives. On the first day of my administration, I declared a state of emergency on homelessness that recognizes the severity of Los Angeles crisis and maximizes the city's ability to urgently move people inside. I'm so encouraged to see many of you join in that effort, and especially when LA County as a whole declared a state of emergency, because I believe, as I know you do as well, that this is a region-wide problem that can only be solved with a region-wide approach. And we must take that mentality with all of the issues that we're working to confront, especially when it comes to business and the environment, because that impacts all of us. In today's digital economy, for example, equity and opportunity cannot be achieved without bridging the digital divide. Today, we're helping people overcome this barrier by working with our telecommunications companies and the federal government to help Angelenos get free internet access. We're also working with the public libraries to provide digital literacy education and with the city's Economic and Workforce Development Department to help small businesses establish and expand their digital footprint. When it comes to the environment, we're also working to deploy the largest DC fast charging hub at any U.S. airport to improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions at LAX, and committing to a major power upgrade project at receiving Station Q that will help prepare the Port of Los Angeles for 100% zero emissions operations. Together, this is all possible, and I look forward to accomplishing that and so much more with each of you. Thank you again for hosting this summit and igniting these important conversations.
Good morning, all. How's everybody doing? So I don't know what's worse, the Lakers getting swept last night or the traffic coming into downtown LA this morning. But nonetheless, we're all here and present, and despite those challenges, we will move forward. My name is Jermaine Hampton. I'm the Senior Director of Workforce Development and Special Projects with LAEDC. And so many of you may have heard about a little thing called SURF. And for those that haven't, SURF is the Community Economic and Resilience Fund. And so with that being said, SURF essentially, LAEDC and our partners from the CCF, the California Community Foundation, we've been meeting with over 400 plus community stakeholders throughout the 88 cities here in LA County for the last year, right? And so we're at a point right now where essentially working with our community partners to build an economic roadmap, right? For resilient, equitable growth here in LA County. In addition to that, also create, build, and sustain high road quality job opportunities and career pathways for our underserved residents here in LA County as well. So this is a massive undertaking. It's a great opportunity. I urge you all to get involved if you aren't. Outside in the foyer out there, we do have a SURF table. Please visit the table and talk with our tremendous staff that will give you more information about the SURF process and how to get engaged and onboarded to the process. You can also visit LAEDC/SURF as well for more information and to engage and on board. And obviously, many of you are already partners, and we thank you as well. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up to the stage our next two panelists. Stephen Cheung, the LAEDC President and CEO, and Mr. Kome Ajise from the Southern California Association of Governments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jermaine, and welcome, Kome. Glad to have you with us today. As you're getting settled, I'm going to jump right into it because we're tight on time. I want to get as many questions in as possible. Before we get started with the conversation, I realized I just jumped on stage. I was so excited about getting this started and being on time. I forgot to introduce myself properly. Last year when you guys were here, you heard from our previous CEO, Bill Allen, who's been leading this organization for the last 17 years. I have the honor of taking over as the new CEO as of January, and it's been really amazing to be able to work with all of you over the last few months, but I've been with the LAEDC for about 8 years now, and in that capacity, learned the importance of working with city governments throughout this entire region. And before that, I was actually with the City of Los Angeles, so I've been in the city government standpoint and perspective and understand the importance of the work that you do as a whole. But as Jermaine was talking about the California Economic Resilience Fund project, I start realizing also that sometimes we don't do good enough of a job organizing as a region. And one of the reasons why I said that is because we've been seeing a lot of the funding from the federal government and sometimes even from the state government going to other regions because collectively, LA, we don't unite together. And what we're hearing over and over again is that if LA unite collectively together, no one can really compete with us in terms of securing those funding. But when we're not doing that, a lot of the funding goes to other regions. So how do we make sure that we're able to work together collectively? And I think sharing some of the challenges and sharing some of these best practices gives us a really good way for us to move forward. And that's why I'm so delighted to have Kome you join us, because in your role as Executive Director for the Southern California Association of Governments, you've seen a lot of these challenges that we're facing, and you've seen not only for this region, but some of the best practices from other regions as well. So I'm gonna jump right into it. And by the way, Kome's bio, we're gonna skip it because you can find it on our program, and it's very extensive, it's very impressive, but we need to get right to the questions. But I encourage you to read it because his experience will give you an understanding in terms of why he's such a great leader and effective leader for this entire region. So the first question to you, Kome, is how does SCAG work with the 88 cities here in Los Angeles County?
Thank you, Stephen. Well, good morning. I'm glad you're not reading the bio. It always sounds like an obituary anyway, so might as well not read it. That's a great question. I really want to get into it myself. First of all, good to be here. Good to be with 88 cities out of my 191 cities that make up SCAG. So you all make up almost half of the city membership that make up SCAG. So it's a unique opportunity for me to be in front of this many member agencies at the same time. Well, what do we do at SCAG? Well, essentially, the way we see our role at SCAG is we don't own or run a whole lot of things. In fact, we don't own or run anything. However, our job is to help make sure that our member agencies do what they do well. And what do I mean by that? Our primary responsibility is to do long-range planning for the entire region, which makes up 6 counties, which is made up of 6 counties and 191 cities. As we look out 20, 25 years and make those plans and set the vision in collaboration with cities, in fact, your information is what builds our plan. We build it from the ground up, and we'll get to that in maybe later on. In doing that, we are very sensitive to the issues that are happening in each of the cities. And so our big push is to bring resources, just like Stephen mentioned earlier on, to bring as much resources to the region as possible, and then turn around and have those resources go back to member agencies to do the things that you don't typically have general fund resources to do. So planning, because if you don't plan, you really can't build. And so being able to have the resources to do planning, helping build capacity in some of our cities that are a little bit low-resourced is also another thing that we try to do well. And bring in, as much as possible, the best technology to the table. And I'll give you an example of that. So we developed a regional data platform at SCAG. And the intent of the regional data platform was to basically bring to every single city in the region the capacity to be able to plan and operate at the world-class level using GIS technology. So we worked with Esri to build this tool. And not only did we build it, we also purchased licenses for every city. Not every city really needs us to buy them a license, but you'll be surprised how many cities, in fact, do need that help. When you take the 191 cities that we have in our region, at least 70% of them, I think, 70% of them, maybe like 68%, but let's round up to 70, are 100,000 population or less. So they're not necessarily big cities. 20% of them, population 20,000 or less. So when you start to look at the capacities that we have across the region, they vary in really vast levels. And so being able to then enable each city to operate at the highest level on a global scale, I think it's one of the things that we try to do at SCAG.
So as you're mentioning that, in terms of coordination, it's so important to coordinate. And I just want to flag right now that I did not coordinate this with Kome, but we just happened to have matching socks. It's well coordinated. That aside, So besides being working at LADC, LADC is also the parent company for the World Trade Center Los Angeles, where we attract international companies from all over the world to come to Los Angeles to open up operations so we can create better jobs and more business opportunities for the entire region. And part of the job is to sell LA to the international community, which a lot of folks get very confused about, because when they come to Los Angeles, they immediately think of Los Angeles City, and they don't understand that there are 88 different cities. They don't understand that we have a population of 10 million people with $800 billion in our GDP. We have the number one, number two container ports in North America, controlling 40% that we know over the last few years because of COVID. We have the third busiest airport in the nation with LAX. We have diverse economies and diverse industries like biosciences and life sciences, aerospace and defense, digital media entertainment, goods movement ecosystem. I mean, you name it. So it's very unique, and we're able to highlight a lot of those great things. But still, people get confused because when they come to Los Angeles, they don't understand. And in fact, many of our local folks get very confused as well. Having worked with the city of Los Angeles, I used to get calls from folks that were really upset about certain issues that are coming up, and they say they're not going to vote for the mayor of Los Angeles anymore. I was like, well, you can't anyways. You live in Pomona. But a lot of folks don't know that, right? So given your 191 cities that you oversee, you represent other regions as well. And in that perspective, what makes Los Angeles County so different from the other counties, not only the ones that you work with, but just throughout maybe even the state and the nation?
Okay, that's the kind of question that gets you in trouble, especially when you have 6 other counties, 5 other counties. Well, I think LA is unique. The statistics you quoted, I think it's instructive and bears re-mentioning. I mean, we live in an economy here in Southern California that is probably, and I say probably because you could be wrong, the most vibrant economic region in the United States. We have, and people don't know this, we have the largest manufacturing in the country. Now, you wouldn't think of LA or the LA region as a manufacturing region, but we do. And of course, the ports are very instrumental to the capacity that we've built in LA. Now, that spread, so we have, I think you mentioned the fact that we have 800 billion in GDP in LA County. Across the region, it's more like 1.2 trillion. So if we were a country, the SCAG region will be the 15th largest economy in the world. So there is a relationship that LA has to the rest of the 5 counties. But LA is sort of like, I'm a planner, and we have this thing in planning that's referred to as the gravity model. In other words, the bigger the size of a body, the more attraction that it has. And LA is that big Jupiter that sits in our region, and it does attract all this goodwill in terms of resources and, of course, the industries. And so our challenge is the stewardship obligation that we have, and we take that very seriously to maintain that vital capacity that LA region has. And so LA is sort of the basis for that, and of course then you have the ancillary connections with the rest of the region, and together then we form this this vital economic region that is, it's the most important for this country. And one of the things that I think is undersold is the capacity that the San Pedro ports bring. We have 3 ports in our region. There's Port Hueneme and Ventura, so I don't want to fail to mention Port Hueneme. But the San Pedro ports are such that they affect every single congressional district in the country, whether it's import or export, every single congressional district in the country. Now, what LA has done, though, is we've sort of borne the burden of servicing those ports with the sales tax measures that we've passed in this county, which is more than any other county. So that's a special self-help capacity that LA's brought to the table to not only service LA County, but the entire state, also the entire country. So the infrastructure that we've built that's enabled the economic engine that LA County is, what I'm suggesting here is that economic capacity is actually also enabling the entire country's economy. And so that's how special LA is, if I could just stop there for now.
I'll jump in there a little bit as well as you're talking about the San Pedro Bay ports, is that especially during COVID, we heard about the crisis situation where a lot of folks didn't even know that there are two ports. They just think there's one, not only for this region but around the nation. And then they couldn't get their gym equipment, and folks just completely lost their minds, and everybody started focusing on LA now, right? And so President Biden was here, Secretary Buttigieg was here. But the other thing to note is that as they're focusing on that emergency situation, because now it's impacting their own personal needs, I remember the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach have told us before that for every dollar that the federal government spends on the West Coast ports, $11 gets spent on the East Coast ports. Meanwhile, we control, back then about 43% of the cargo coming in, which means that we pay that portion of the taxes. So by distributing it 11-1 on the East Coast, we're now subsidizing our competitors in the East Coast. And yet, at the same time, this region, I don't think we've done good enough of a job in terms of organizing to basically saying, hey, we're having the brunt of the congestion and some of the issues that come with just entire goods movement ecosystem. And then when you guys are here, you guys are always focusing on the negative. But nobody, it was all over the news, right? The 100 ships that are outside San Pedro Bay Port, and everybody was just, again, losing their minds. But when we had those issues resolved, and within, a year, you had 4 ships outside. Where was CNN? Where was all the media coverage saying, oh my God, the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach did an amazing job, along with all the cities and all the partners to solve that issue? How do we tell that message?
Well, we just have to keep telling it. I think we're compelling enough to bring the president and the secretary out here. And I counted 6 times that the secretary came out here and to talk about the port issues. And every time that I had a chance to be in those meetings, one of the things that we like to tell them is exactly what I was saying earlier on, is that we've borne the burden of servicing the goods movement supply chain system. Not only in terms of the infrastructure that we've invested in, because we self-taxed ourselves to build those roadways and the Alameda Corridor investment that we ensued here in this region, but also in our neighborhoods. The pathologies of the supply chain that we're seeing affecting our neighborhoods and especially some of the low-income areas. So these are things that we want to call attention to at the national level, such that when funding comes through, they're not just thinking about funding infrastructure to enable more goods movement, but also fund the mitigation of that. And so the total cost of the supply chain is not just the infrastructure and enabling the velocity and capacity of goods movement, but it's also making sure that we mitigate for what's happening in some of our neighborhoods that are close to the hubs and the port complex.
Another point I want to jump back to that you mentioned was very significant. You mentioned that this region, again, a lot of the folks outside of this region, they don't know the difference between, the city of Los Angeles and, say, other cities around there. And one example that I used to give to the international community is like, what's the difference between Hollywood, West Hollywood, North Hollywood? Is there South Hollywood? Which one's the city? Why is, which one's the county? How do you get your permits, right? Our international partners and even our local folks, sometimes they don't know it, but looking at it as the region you're mentioning, when you combine all of that power together, now we have the 15th largest economy in the world at $1.2 trillion. I want to reframe that so that for this room, like we understand the power that we have here. The 15th largest economy which makes Los Angeles region tied with Mexico as the 15th largest economy in the world. LA region is tied with Mexico. So we're not a city or a county, we're a country, not even a small country, we're a major player. And so if we're able to unite our power together from an international front, this can be a very powerful way for us to make sure that we're able to attract the right types of company, but I think sometimes we don't take our rightful place, not only on the international stage, but even on the national stage. And that's why going back, and we're going to keep going back to this, I'm going to ask you more questions about this as well, is that as the federal dollars are coming through, as the state dollars are coming through, how do we make sure that our elected officials and our government officials from a federal and a state perspective understand how important of a region this is?
Well, I think it starts with a gathering like this, because if we don't gather like this and talk about it, we don't know. One of the things that we suffer from, I think, a lot is we're all very busy, and we have issues within each city that will consume you day and night, and you don't have to look anywhere else. You have enough work to do. But really, what we do at SCAG is really nothing but a collection of all of these cities that are sitting here today. And my board is made up of council members and mayors of all of the 191 cities. So we're not this extraordinary agency. We're the same as you. So our work is in service of local government. But what we find at SCAG is we're able to talk about issues that transcend the borders of each city. And so we come together to have that conversation. So beginning here and understanding this, understanding that we're in this together, I think allows us then to have that unified voice. That's one of the things that we try to do at SCAG, is to build that advocacy capacity, that the voices that we all have together come through, such that when we go to Sacramento, which we just did, we're able to speak forcefully for the region. When we go to DC, which we're going to do with different groups, we go to DC 3-4 times a year. There's a reason. Those trips can be mind-numbing sometimes, but it's important to be able to say, I'm here to fight for the region, not for my individual city, because the city they can throw $5 million at you to do a project, and then what? It has absolutely no impact on the rest of the region. The issues are still there. But when they start to see us as a region, which, by the way, I've been told several times by others that the Bay Area tends to do that better than we do. They come together very quickly and unify around one project, and it becomes the #1 project, and they get funded. And so we wonder why our projects are not funded, because we are not in that collective conversation to understand why this one project, if we get it done, will benefit more cities than the city in which it is. And so we need to kind of begin to think as a region, and on some things we do. And the more we do that, I think the more we're going to impress on. We have the largest delegation in Sacramento from our region. We have the largest delegation in DC from our region. Can we give them the ammunition for them to be able to fight on behalf of our needs in the region?
I want to jump into other questions, but you just mentioned something that I can't move away from, because I want to make sure that we're using this opportunity as we're talking about the purpose today is to organize the cities and organize this region together. So I'll give you a very practical example of something that we've been dealing with over the last few years, especially when you mentioned about advocacy and making sure that we're able to bring together the region. The Economic Development Administration a few years ago had this Build Back Better Regional Challenge. Is $1 billion that was issued by the U.S. Economic Development Administration. And basically they're asking all the regions around the nation to compete. And LAEDC was asked to be the convener to bring the groups together, and we applied, and we got our approved for a phase 1 application. So we won that phase 1, specifically talk about goods movement ecosystem, how that ties with the blue and green economy. That grant was $500,000 for a planning grant. We were one of 60 finalists out of this 529 applicants that went through. It was a great application. It was great to work with all of you to basically bring that application together. But in phase 2, we didn't win. And what ended up happening was Central Valley, Fresno in particular, did an excellent job, and they were able to secure over $60 million for the EDA grant for their region. Separately, as a part of the Good Job Challenge, the EDA grant, there's something called the Good Job Challenge. They also received another $30-something million for that grant. So combined together, the Central Valley and Fresno region received about $100 million. LA got 0, San Francisco got 0, San Diego got 0. And meanwhile, we did a research report with WEDAX with the LA County back in 2021. We identified that in the first 2 months of COVID, LA County lost 780,000 jobs in 2 months. That's the size of bigger than Fresno, the jobs that we lost. And yet, at the same time, we weren't organized enough to be able to advocate for that. And so good for Fresno, but really shame on us for not being able to secure it. But now IAJ and IRA is coming through. I just want to flag that as a perfect example in terms of what we need to do to unite together to do this. Separately, Jermaine was mentioning about SURF. Just so you know, SURF is now, there's $600 million allocated by the state of California. They're dividing us into 13 equal regions. So each of the regions gets $5 million for a planning grant. Again, LAEDC and California Community Foundation was fortunate enough to be asked to be the convener and all the fiscal agents. So for $5 million, we have to organize 10 million people. And the Central Valley region also got $5 million to organize a fraction of basically what we have. And as we're moving forward, the remaining $450 million in competition, it hasn't been stated in terms of how they're going to divide it up. So if we don't basically advocate for our fair share, they might divide it up into 13 regions again. So we might get the same amount that the other regions are getting, even though our population is so much bigger. So I just want to flag that as a call to action, that we will be asking all of you to engage in the SURF process and the other process. And hopefully we can work very closely with SCAG and some of the other partners to make sure these opportunities are coming through all the cities involved to make sure that we get our fair share. So we're not getting that $5 million. We're getting the hundreds of millions of dollars that we need to recover.
You deserve.
Yeah, and we deserve. That's a good point.
Well, when the SURF conversation began, one of the first calls we got was, SCAG, do you want to represent Southern California? And we asked, well, what does that look like? Well, you'd just be one region. Well, that didn't make any sense. We're almost half the population of the state. Why would we be one region? So that's why we elected to not be the convener of that conversation and wanted it to be broken down such that many of our sub-regions will be participants.
Now, going back to the summit, and today the focus will be on homelessness, the digital divide, clean tech infrastructure. And some folks might consider these issues not traditional economic development issues. What would you say to those?
Well, absolutely, it's economic development. I mean, to the extent that when you start with the issue of equity, just to start with, if we're not enabling, I should say, every single member of society to participate in the economy, then we're not working at full capacity. And so that's the way I come at equity. Equity is not taken from somebody and given to somebody else. Absolutely not. It is enabling every member of our community to be able to participate as much as possible in the economy. And there was a study, this has been studied to death. The last study I looked at was a couple of years ago, actually it was in 2020, that suggested that we would see an additional 5 to 8% growth in GDP just by making sure that we have equity to some extent in our economy. And so when you start to look at things like homelessness, that's a drag on our economy. So it's an economic development issue. There are many cities that are just burdened by the issues of homelessness. It doesn't allow businesses to thrive, but we have to look at it rationally and not look at it as something somebody else needs to deal with. It is all of our problems. We also know that it's multidimensional. It's not a one single issue type problem. It's a multidimensional, and so we have to be smart about how we address it. I just saw a presentation last week where the suggestion in LA County is we have about 227 people every single day on average coming out of homelessness. At the same time, we have 207 people on a regular basis coming into, no, I have it backwards. 207 people coming out, 227 people coming in. So there's about 20 people in that churn where we are basically progressively, marginally increasing homelessness as we go along. And the deal there is, when we think of homelessness, we always think about, the mentally challenged folks, people that have mental health issues. We think about drug abuse issues, and we sort of assume that is the bulk of it. That is part of it. In fact, it might be part of the core element, at least from the studies that I've seen, and that requires a whole different approach to it. But there's also the economic issue where people are just marginally surviving, and they are in that churn where they're coming out of and at risk. And that at risk is also an economic development issue, because to the extent that people are working and can't afford a place to stay, they're not working at full capacity. And so again, I'm pulling that out because I think we need to look at this as a collective issue that we need to solve. Just, besides the fact that it's a moral issue, we shouldn't expect any of our neighbors to be sleeping outside of a shelter. And so that's part of that. So there's the moral issue of it, but there is also the most compelling economic issue of it, where to the extent that we can house all of our neighbors, we're going to be able to then get productivity out of them. So I feel like the issue of housing, which is where we come in, we don't deal with homelessness as much at SCAG, but it's not too far from the housing crisis. In fact, it's as related. So when you think about the folks that are at risk of being homeless, that's a housing crisis issue because of the cost burden, where people are paying more than 50% of their income to house. That really is too razor thin of a margin to be existing at. And so the potential of being able to drop out of the housing market is very high when you're that at risk. And we see that oftentimes people think it's just the rent. Sometimes it's the distance that you have to live from work. So even if you're paying 30% of your income as rent, when you have to commute and that costs you 30%, now that housing decision that you had to make is now costing you 60% because you're living so far away from work. And so these are the economic components of it. And so our challenge, we hadn't been involved in housing at SCAG. Our challenge has been, how do we enable cities? Because cities don't build houses. I think you all agree with me on that. Cities don't build houses, and there's a pressure on cities to build houses. Cities can enable housing, but you have to give cities tools and the capacity to do that. And that's really what we have focused on the last 2 years with the resources that we've been able to drag out of the state. The state gave us, and the REAP program, $47 million, which we quickly spread out to all of our sub-regions, which then went to the cities to help, first of all, plan for housing elements. Now, I can say I'm not sad about the Lakers losing because because you can't hate me more than the RENA program that we ran, right? Because SCAG was responsible for RENA, Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and a lot of cities did not like the numbers they got. And that was a number that was imposed on us by the state. But the number was intended to do planning, because if you don't plan for something, it doesn't happen. I've been taught in planning school that when something happens that you didn't plan for, that's usually an accident. So the idea of housing requires us to plan. And so being able to plan for housing, I think it's really one of the assignments that we've taken very seriously at SCAG to enable cities to be able to do that. And so we ran this program with the $47 million that the state gave us. 3 key things came out of that. One was to build capacity. And we work with CCF to help build capacity with cities that are low resourced. That was one element of it. We also decided, we need education. So we created this housing academy for leadership academy, such that cities and city leadership, community leadership can come and have a conversation about housing. And then I think the third one was to create, and I'm trying to remember it now, and it escapes me. But we had these 3 main programs that we wanted to make sure that we build capacity, and then we needed to start talking about housing production. And so we're working on the legislative side to see about bringing capacity for tax increment, for example, to be able to buy down housing. And so we're working on things like regional utilities aggregation, so that the utility cost that goes into housing can be subsidized, so that the ultimate end, the housing cost itself, will be affordable. So there's a number of programs that we're working on there. I know I've thrown a lot at you. I'm going to breathe and let Steve talk.
You also mentioned, Kome, earlier specifically about equity, and I want to echo something that Steve said in his opening remarks, right? It's now, especially around the nation, it's becoming a bit of a buzzword, but the thing is, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to actually do it. So diversity, equity, inclusion are at the core of most organizations here in Los Angeles County, and around the nation, folks are actually looking at us to see what we're doing as an example. Well, one of the things that was really interesting was during the EDA grant, we were invited to DC to present our projects and pitch so that foundations can look at funding these projects. And so we talked a little bit about our challenges. We shared a little bit in terms of these are the things that we have to deal with so that we can learn from the other regions. So one of the things I said is in order for us to basically to be truly inclusive, especially in a region like Los Angeles, is that we have to do it in English and Spanish and Mandarin and Cantonese and Korean and Armenian and 14 languages as a basic. How do you do it in your region? And there's like, we only do it in English. So when they're looking at us, they just are so baffled in terms of just that concept of linguistic and cultural sensitivity and diversity. So how can cities maintain that value and these values of diversity, equity, inclusion while trying to get their work done, which is immense?
Well, it's a challenge, and I think people underestimate the capacity that's available to, they overestimate the capacity that's available to cities. We've been talking about, doing a whole different holistic. I was having this conversation with a senator, Senator Herzberg, actually. That was 3 years ago, pre-COVID, because he's a tax policy wonk, and about rethinking how we do municipal finance in California, because it's on some level it's perverse, because we make cities do things that they really don't want to do because they just don't have the capacity, the resources to do that. So one of the things that we've tried to do that I feel like enables us to extend the capacity at city level is to share information, is to basically share best practices, and that's what we do best at SCAG. So each city doesn't have to spend the resources they don't have to do the same thing over and over again and replicate it and spend the same amount of consulting dollars to create the same tool. So we tend to, at SCAG at least, tend to create tools that are available to all cities. When the housing element issue was really hot and heavy, we created a tool on GIS that allowed cities that needed it to be able to locate parcels and look at parcels that can go into their housing element. The helper tool was well documented and well used. We also, one of the things we did was for every single city in our region, we actually pre-approved, we worked with HCD to pre-approve their socioeconomic data, so they didn't have to spend resources doing that. So on some level, at the regional scale, we have the capacity to build some of that help, such that you don't have to do it at the city level. And so, to your point, to your question about how do we do all these things and do it right? I think, in essence, until we change the structure of resource in our cities, we all have to sort of borrow from each other and learn from each other and create forums like this where we find out what city A is doing, such that I can borrow it and template it and take it to my city and not have to spend all that resources to create the same issue. The third thing I was trying to remember earlier on was a toolkit that we created for cities that would use it to be able to identify retail that's underperforming. And we work with USC to create this toolkit that allows cities to be able to look at underutilized retail and be able to convert it to housing or housing locations.
As we're closing in, we're starting to run out of time. I want to, you're talking about all these tools and all these resources you've created by SCAG for the city to be able to take advantage of. Tell us a bit more about Connect SoCal 2024 and how the audience can participate and benefit from it.
Oh, thank you. I would probably not allow back to the building if I didn't talk about Connect SoCal. So Connect SoCal is what we call our regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy. This is actually the primary assignment that we have at SCAG. SCAG was formed in 1965 primarily to do regional planning for the 6-county region. And one of the main, in fact, the main product that we have is the development and the approval of a long-range transportation plan that we do every 4 years due to the requirements in both federal and state law. Rather than call it a regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy, which is the official name, we just call it Connect SoCal. So Connect SoCal 2024 is in development, and it was really built based on information that we gathered from every single city. So we have this bottoms-up, taking cities' information on employment, households, and population, and then use that to create a vision for the future. We're in the works right now building that plan, having collected information. We actually have one-on-one conversations with every single one of our 191 cities, and that's sort of come together now. We're building the model. We're going to run the model. Our model is the region's model for air quality conformity. So if any project needs federal or state approval, it has to be in that model for regional conformity. So we're building that plan. We have on Thursday, we have an open house public meeting for input. If you're in the neighborhood, stop by our office, 900 Wilshire Boulevard, and participate. You can also go online, connectsocal.org, and get some more information on the plan. And by all means, if you go online, take the survey and tell us what you think about where the region should grow and how we should move and who we're planning for. These are the questions that you'll see on there. So this is a regional collective that we're doing, and our regional council, which is made up of all cities, will be approving the plan in the spring of next year. But the draft plan will be out for public review and circulation sometime in the fall.
So I'm going to go off script here and not ask the for those of you who have been in my panels before, I like to hit do the hard-hitting question off script as the final question. Your work working with 191 cities, obviously very challenging and very stressful. Where in Los Angeles County do you check out to relax and to have that mental health, that time to yourself?
Oh, well, I mean, there's nothing like going to the beach. I mean, that's, and it's something you can do, and it doesn't cost you a whole lot. I actually take the train sometimes because I don't have a car. Don't look at me like a hero. When I say I don't have a car, people go, "Oh, wow, you're living your talk." No, I don't have a car because I got rid of my car, and I've been too lazy to go find another one, and it's been a year already, actually more than a year. So I've taken transit, and I've taken Uber, I've rented a car and gone to the ocean and just spend time out there. That's what I do for the most part. I also like to just drive around and find new places because I'm relatively new to the region. I lived and worked in Sacramento for a long time before coming down to Southern California in 2017. So I'm still finding myself discovering different parts of the region. And so yeah, Elysian Park is another one that I like to drive through because you can just stand up there and feel like you own the world because you you have a nice perch up there. I don't know if you all know, many of you might know Tommy LaBonge. Tommy took me on a tour of the city. I was so fortunate and blessed to have had that chance to spend with him, and he drove me through and showed me some wonderful places that I've been able to also go back and check out on the weekends.
Well, thank you so much for your sage advice and a call to action for everybody to get involved and coordinate your socks when you go on stage because it looks good on camera. But also, thank you for your recommendation as well in terms of how we need to check out sometimes and basically get your mental capacity back. But we're delighted, and hopefully all of you will engage with SCAG and engage with Kome. Ladies and gentlemen, Kome Ajise. Thank you for